My perfect sister accused me of stealing $15,000, and my parents threw me out. But when she got arrested for massive fraud and they lost all their savings, they came begging for help and I left them on read. I'm 28 years old. I work at a hardware store and run a small online shop that's just taking off. And I need to tell this story because what happened to me like 2 years ago still makes my blood boil every time I think about it. I guess I should start from the beginning. When my handmade jewelry business went to shit because of a combination of bad luck and, you know, a global pandemic that basically destroyed everything I'd built. It's not like I was a millionaire or anything, but I was making enough to live on, to pay my rent, to feel like a functional adult person. And then 2020 came along and everything collapsed like a house of cards. My sister Amanda was always the family star. Honestly. Ever since we were kids, she was the one who got the best grades, who had the perfect boyfriend, who landed the incredible jobs. I was more like the weird, artsy one in the family. The one who made bracelets and necklaces instead of studying business administration like my parents wanted. Amanda got married to Derek when she was like 24, started her own beauty and personal care products company that was apparently doing super well, and my parents wouldn't stop talking about how proud they were of her. Meanwhile, I was in my little apartment making jewelry by hand and selling it at craft fairs and on Etsy, happy with my life but definitely not being the star daughter. When my business started sinking, and when I say sinking, I mean I literally couldn't pay rent and was eating instant noodles every day, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. I explained the situation, that I needed temporary help, that I just needed a place to stay while I got reorganized and found a stable job. My mom told me she'd talk to my dad about it and would call me back. 3 days passed and the one who called me was Amanda. She told me, "Hey Rachel, I heard you're going through a rough time. Why don't you come stay with us for a while? I have space in the house. I can lend you some money to get stable. And plus, I need help in the business. So you could work for me and earn a salary while you recover." Honestly, it surprised me because Amanda and I were never super close. It's not that we hated each other or anything, but she was always in her perfect world and I was in mine. But at that moment, I was desperate. Like really desperate. So I accepted. I thought, well, she's my sister. She's family. And she's offering help when I need it most. How naive I was. Seriously. I moved back to my hometown in March 2021. I remember the date perfectly because it was right after my 26th birthday, and I felt like a total failure going back home with nothing. Amanda set me up in the guest room of her house, which was huge, by the way, like one of those modern 3-story houses with a giant yard. Derek worked in some finance thing and was hardly ever home. Amanda explained that her business consisted of importing beauty and personal care products and selling them online and in boutique stores. Apparently, it was going incredibly well. She had like 10 employees and a whole warehouse of inventory. My job basically consisted of packing orders, updating inventory, answering customer emails, that kind of thing. It wasn't hard, but it was boring and repetitive. Amanda paid me like $800 a month, which wasn't much, but considering I wasn't paying rent or food, I figured it was okay to start. My parents lived like 20 minutes away and I saw them occasionally for family dinners, where I basically listened to Amanda talk about how well her business was going while I sat there like a loser eating my mom's roast chicken. The thing is, Amanda was pretty demanding as a boss. She'd call me at 11 at night to ask if I'd updated something in the system. She'd send me messages at 6 in the morning, saying she needed me to go to the warehouse early because an important shipment was arriving. Derek never said anything. He'd just leave for work early and come back late. And when he was home, he'd lock himself in his office. I thought, well, this is temporary. In a few months, I'll save a bit of money, find a cheap apartment, and get out of here. Like 4 months passed and I'd managed to save about $2,500, which wasn't much, but it was something. I had it in my bank account and was starting to look for apartments and more stable jobs when one day, it was July, I think, I checked my bank account and it was at zero, completely empty. I went into horrible panic mode, called the bank immediately thinking I'd been hacked or something. They told me there had been a transfer of the $2,500 to another account 2 days earlier, authorized with my security information. I froze. I checked all my transactions. I hadn't made any transfer. I changed all my passwords, called the bank again to report the fraud, and I was in total crisis mode when Amanda got home. I told her what had happened and she got all worried. Told me how horrible, that it must be a hacker, that I should be more careful with my personal information. I was devastated because that money was literally all I had. Like 3 days passed, and I was still dealing with the bank trying to recover my money when my parents called me and told me to come to their house immediately, that they needed to talk to me about something urgent. I went thinking, maybe they wanted to give me encouragement about the bank robbery thing or something. I arrived, and they were both sitting in the living room with super serious faces, and Amanda was there too with Derek, and I thought, what's going on? My dad went straight to the point. He told me, Rachel, we have evidence that you stole $15,000 from the family account. I stood there, trying to process what I'd just heard. I said, what? What are you talking about? My mom started crying and said she couldn't believe her own daughter would steal from them after everything they'd done for me. I was in total shock. Literally couldn't understand what was happening. I told them I hadn't stolen anything, that I didn't even know what account they were talking about. Amanda then pulled out her laptop and showed me evidence of transfers that supposedly I had made from my computer, using the information from the family savings account that my parents had for emergencies. She showed me dates, times, IP addresses, everything. And the worst part is that the transfers supposedly had been made when I was alone at Amanda's house, working on the computer in the guest room. I kept saying no, that I didn't do that someone else must have done it. But the more I talked, the angrier my dad got. He yelled at me that I was a liar, a thief, an ungrateful person who had abused my sister's generosity. My mom wouldn't stop crying, saying, how could I do this to them after Amanda gave me a roof and a job, when no one else would? I tried to defend myself, told them to check carefully, that this didn't make sense, that I had just been a victim of bank robbery. Too, wasn't it obvious that something weird was going on? But my dad just kept yelling, and Amanda was sitting there with a victim face crying and saying that she had opened the doors of her house to me, and this is how I repaid her. Derek didn't say anything, just looked at the floor with an uncomfortable face. In the end, my dad told me I had half an hour to get all my stuff out of Amanda's house, and that he never wanted to see me again. That I was a disgrace to the family, that I'd broken my mother's heart, and that if I didn't leave voluntarily, he'd call the police. My mom just kept crying and saying things like, where did I go wrong with you? How did we raise someone like this? I went back to Amanda's house in like an automatic shock state. She followed me and watched while I stuffed my things into 2 suitcases and a backpack. That was literally all I had in the world. At that moment, I asked her why she was doing this, why she was lying to me, and she just looked at me with this cold face I'd never seen on her and told me, you should have planned your life better, Rachel, and that was it. Derek appeared briefly, looked at me kind of with pity, but didn't say anything, and I left that house with my 2 suitcases, having no idea where to go. I had no money, I had no job apart from the one I'd just lost. I had no family because they'd basically disowned me completely. I stayed that night at a Salvation Army shelter that was in town, one of those where they give you a bed and a meal if you qualify as a person in need. There I was, 26 years old, sleeping in a shelter surrounded by people who had lost everything, and I was one of them. I spent the whole night crying, trying to understand what had happened, how my own sister had done this to me. The next few months were, honestly, the worst of my life. I got temp jobs doing whatever, cleaning houses, working at fast food restaurants, anything that would give me immediate money. I slept at that shelter for like 2 weeks until an older lady I met there, Mrs. Martinez was her name, told me I could stay on her couch for a while if I helped her with shopping and cleaning because she had arthritis and it was hard for her. I stayed at her house for like 2 months, sleeping on a beat-up couch, but at least I had a roof. During all that time, I tried to contact my parents several times. I sent them messages, emails, tried to call them, but they never answered. Once I went to their house and my dad yelled at me from the door to leave, or he'd call the police. My mom didn't even come out to see me. I tried to explain to them that I hadn't stolen anything, that Amanda had set me up, but they didn't want to listen. To them, I was the drug addict, thief daughter who had betrayed the family, and Amanda was the saint who had tried to help me and I'd repaid her badly. In September, I got a job at a small bakery that was looking for someone for the early morning shift. I had to get up at 3 in the morning to be there at 4, but they paid $10 an hour and gave me free bread to take home, which was basically a blessing at that time. Mrs. Martinez still let me stay on her couch in exchange for help, and that's how I survived day by day. I stopped trying to contact my family because obviously it was pointless. In November, one of the regular customers at the bakery, A guy named Tom, who owned a hardware store in town, offered me a job. He told me he'd noticed I was very hardworking and reliable, and that he needed someone to help in his store because he was expanding the business. He offered me $14 an hour with benefits after 3 months. I accepted immediately. I left the bakery on good terms and started at the hardware store in December. By then, I'd saved enough to rent a tiny studio, basically a room with a shared kitchen and bathroom, but it was mine and I didn't have to sleep on Mrs. Martinez's couch anymore, although I visited her often because she'd been amazing to me. The job at the hardware store turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Tom taught me tons about tools, construction, home repairs, all that kind of stuff. I absorbed all that information like a sponge because I finally felt like I was learning useful skills. I also started making friends there, normal working people who didn't judge me for my situation. Little by little, I started feeling more stable, more like a real person again. By March 2022, like a year after they'd kicked me out, I was pretty well established at the hardware store. Tom had given me a raise and more responsibilities, and I was slowly saving money. I still made jewelry in my spare time, but now it was more like a hobby than a business. I hadn't had any contact with my family in all that time, and honestly, I'd started to accept that I probably never would again. And then, one day in April, I got a message from Derek on Facebook. It was the first time anyone from that part of my life had tried to contact me in over a year. The message said something like, "Rachel, I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but I need to talk to you urgently. It's about Amanda and your parents. Please call me." He left his number. I spent like 2 days debating whether to call him or not. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, but another part was curious about what could be so urgent. I finally called him, and Derek sounded desperate. He told me everything had gone to hell, that Amanda was in serious legal trouble, that my parents' savings had disappeared, that they needed help. I told him, "Wait, slow down, explain to me what's happening." And then Derek dropped the whole story on me. Turns out Amanda had never been importing legitimate beauty products. She'd been buying cheap counterfeit products from China, like imitations of expensive brands, and selling them as if they were original. At first it went well because people didn't notice, but eventually several customers started having severe allergic reactions to the products. One woman ended up in the hospital with chemical burns on her face from a supposed vitamin C serum that Amanda sold her. The woman sued her, and that uncovered the whole operation. The authorities investigated Amanda's business and discovered that not only was she selling counterfeit products, but she was also evading taxes and using investors' money, including the money from my parents' savings account, to maintain the appearance of success while the business was actually going bankrupt. The money I'd supposedly stolen was actually money that Amanda had taken out to cover her debts. And she'd blamed me to divert attention and to be able to take even more money from my parents with the excuse that she was recovering from my supposed theft. Derek told me he didn't know anything about this, that Amanda had lied to him the whole time, that when everything came to light he was in shock. Amanda now faced criminal charges for fraud, selling dangerous products, tax evasion, a bunch of things. The business was closed, all bank accounts were frozen by the investigation, and my parents had lost basically all their retirement savings that Amanda had convinced them to invest in her business. I stayed silent processing all this. Derek kept talking, saying that my parents were devastated, that they'd realized they'd made a terrible mistake with me, that Amanda had confessed to them that she'd set me up, that they needed help because they didn't have money for Amanda's lawyers or for their own expenses. He was asking me for help. Me. After what they'd done to me. I told Derek, "Let me understand this correctly. Amanda ruined my life, stole my money, convinced my parents I was a thief, got me kicked out with nothing, and now that her whole castle of lies has crumbled, you want me to help them?" Derek started babbling something about family and second chances, and I cut him off. I told him, "Thanks for telling me what really happened, but the answer is no." I hung up. Like 2 weeks later, my mom called me. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in over a year. She was crying, saying she was so sorry, that they'd been terrible to me, that Amanda had lied to them about everything, that please forgive them, that they needed help. I was on my shift at the hardware store when she called and I had to go outside so I wouldn't make a scene. I listened to her cry and beg for like 5 minutes, and I felt nothing. Like, you'd expect to feel something, right? Pity, anger, sadness, something. But I just felt this cold emptiness. I told her, Mom, when I needed help, when I begged you to believe me, you called me a thief and threw me out on the street. You chose to believe Amanda's lies rather than give me the benefit of the doubt. I lived in a shelter. I slept on a stranger's couch. I worked early morning shifts just to survive. And never, not once in all that time, did you try to contact me or wonder if maybe you'd been wrong. Now that Amanda turned out to be the liar and you lost your money, you want me to solve your problems? No. Good luck with everything. And I hung up. My mom tried to call me like 10 more times that day. I didn't answer. My dad sent me long emails explaining how Amanda had manipulated them, how terrible they felt about what they did to me. I deleted them without reading after the first one. I didn't want to know. Derek sent me another message saying to please reconsider. That family was important. I blocked him. The ironic thing about all this is that right when my family was falling apart and coming to ask me for help, my life was finally improving. Tom had promoted me to assistant manager of the hardware store with a decent salary. I'd started selling my jewelry online again, but now with a different approach, more artisanal and unique, and I was having more success than before. I applied for a small grant for entrepreneurs who had overcome significant adversities, and I won it. It was like $5,000 to invest in my business. I used that money to buy better materials and equipment to make jewelry and set up a proper online store. By June 2022, I was earning almost as much from jewelry as from my job at the hardware store. Tom was super understanding and let me reduce my hours to dedicate more time to my business. By September, I was earning enough from jewelry that I left the hardware store, although we're still good friends, and I still go visit him. Meanwhile, I heard through town gossip that Amanda had accepted a plea deal with the prosecutor and was serving probation, plus paying huge fines that she'd probably never finish paying. Derek divorced her like in August. My parents had to sell their big house and move to a small apartment because they couldn't maintain the payments without their savings. My dad had to go back to work even though he was like 62 and planning to retire. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't feel satisfaction when I found out about all that. You know what it feels like to see the people who destroyed your life suffer the consequences of their own actions? It's like a weird vindication. It's not that I'd done anything to cause them problems. They dug their own grave all by themselves. But seeing it happen felt like cosmic justice or something. My mom still tries to contact me every now and then. She sends me messages on my birthday, at Christmas, telling me she misses me, that she wants to fix things. I don't answer. My dad stopped trying after I ignored like 20 emails. Amanda sent me a letter a few months ago, handwritten, asking for forgiveness and saying she was in therapy, working on her issues. I ripped it up without finishing reading it. Derek unblocked me and sent me a message recently saying he was sorry too for not saying anything when he knew something wasn't right. I answered him, okay, and left it at that. The truth is, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them. I guess there are people who would say I should be the bigger person, that family is family, that everyone deserves second chances. But I was there, standing in my parents' living room while they called me a thief and kicked me out without caring if I had anywhere to go. I was working early morning shifts with my body aching just to be able to eat. I was crying on that borrowed couch, wondering what I'd done to deserve all that. And they weren't there for any of that because they believed Amanda's lies without questioning anything. Now I'm 28. My jewelry business is doing well. I'm saving to buy my own place. And I finally feel like I have control over my life. I made new friends who are more family to me than my blood family ever was. Mrs. Martinez comes to dinner at my apartment once a month and I help her with her shopping. Tom invites me to the family barbecues he has. I have a life I built myself from scratch. After they took everything from me and my family, let them deal with the consequences of their actions. Amanda played stupid games and won stupid prizes. My parents chose to believe the daughter who showed them what they wanted to see instead of defending the daughter who really needed help. Those were their decisions, not mine. I'm just living my life. And honestly, I'm doing pretty well without them. Sometimes I wonder if I'm a bad person for not wanting to forgive them. But then I remember that night at the shelter, with my 2 suitcases and not a penny, and I remember that I deserve to surround myself with people who value me and believe me. And those people definitely don't include Amanda or my parents. Maybe someday I'll change my mind. I don't know. But for now, I'm fine with how things are. More than fine, actually.